So in this lesson, we'll talk about the Arduino environment in general. So that includes the Arduino itself, but also the software environment and the other hardware components that you can add on to an Arduino. So we'll introduce those right here. So the Arduino environment starts off with the Arduino development board itself. Looks like this. Now the development board, it's got an 8-bit microcontroller, and actually when you get your development board, it might look different than this. They all look slightly different. Not they all, but this is an Arduino Uno. And the Arduino Unos, this is the one that you should be getting. If you get a new one, it should be version 3. And this one might be a little bit older, but they all look very similar. So there's an 8-bit microcontroller on there. The big chip on there you can see is an 8-bit microcontroller. And there are other chips in there too to interact with the USB and things like this. There's other hardware on there to allow you to program the microcontroller. So through the USB. So the USB port, you can see that in the top left. That's the cable that's going to be connected to your desktop, laptop, and your code will go across that cable when you want to program it. So there's hardware in there. There's a chip in there that communicates, actually just behind the USB cable is a chip that communicates with the USB and allows to transfer data to the microcontroller. So that's the USB programming interface. There's also software on the Arduino, the bootloader, that handles that too. And there are I/O pins. Now I/O pins, I/O stands for input output. The pins are the connection to the outside world. So on the Arduino board, you can see them on the top and on the bottom. That row on the top and row on the bottom, there are these holes. Maybe a little hard to see, but there are whole holes on there. And those holes, you can stick wires in there. And those holes are directly wired through the board to the pins of the chip. So if you look at that chip, it's got these pins, these pieces of metal sticking out that are the leads that connect it to the outside world. And those are wired through the board, through traces on the board to those holes. So by connecting wires to those holes, you can connect other devices to the microcontroller. So the Arduino development board right there is the sort of the first component in the environment, but that's not the whole thing. Arduino also has a software environment, an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and you can see an image of it here. Basically what this is for coding. You write the code in there. And by the way, technically you don't have to use the Arduino IDE. You can program an Arduino using Eclipse or some other IDE if you want to. We're going to go with the Arduino IDE. It's easier. It's easier to handle. Arduino Eclipse is more versatile, and it can do a lot of things. And if you're very used to it, then okay. But we're going to go with the Arduino IDE. So the Arduino IDE, you can write code in there. You can compile the code. You can program it, upload it to your board, things like that. We're not seeing the whole thing, but we'll go through it in slides later. But this is an important part of the environment. You download this from the website, arduino.cc. You go there, you download this, you install it on your machine. It works on every platform, Windows, Linux, Mac, maybe Android. I don't know. I have to check. But Arduino environment, you download this, you install it. It's got the cross compiler. Meaning it takes your code, your sketch, Arduino sketch, and compiles it for the target platform, which is the Arduino's processor, the Atmega 328. Also, it's got a debugger in there. It's got a little bit of a simulator, and it's got a programmer, so it allows you to actually copy your code, copy the executable code onto the Arduino. So we'll be using that, and that's an important part of the environment. We'll go through it in detail in later slides. So far we've got the Arduino development board, we've got the Arduino IDE, which you see here for programming. Also, you've got the shields, what they call Arduino shields. Now, these shields, this is one of the things that people really like about Arduino. The reason why Arduino has gotten so popular is because people can use Arduino to build hardware software systems, without knowing hardly anything about hardware. And part of the way they do that is with these shields. So when you actually want to make a more complicated system, you need complicated devices, complicated integrated circuits. So actually, if you look here, you've got a stack of 3 boards. It's a little hard to see, but there's a stack of 3 boards. On the top is actually the Ethernet controller shield, and we'll work with this later in the course. But the Ethernet controller shield, it's got an Ethernet jack, which you can connect to the Ethernet with. A wired connection. And in the middle of that, there is a chip, an integrated circuit, which is called an Ethernet controller. And it is needed to manage the Ethernet connection. Now, if you were to do this from scratch, connect to an Ethernet controller chip, it would be a lot of work. You know, the data sheet on that Ethernet controller, actually, I think I've used that Ethernet controller separately. I had a student group do it, and it's hundreds of pages for that data sheet. It's very complicated. There's a lot of wiring. The thing looks like it has 80 pins on the side. You got to wire all that up. It's a lot of wiring, and it's a lot of coding. But what happens with these shields is they basically pre-wire everything. So they give you a board, a little shield, which has the chip on there pre-wired. You take that board, you stack it on top of the Arduino. So it has pins going out underneath the board, and you stack it on top, it goes into the holes in the Arduino board. So it is immediately just wired for you to the Arduino. You don't have to do any work, all right? You don't have to have any knowledge about the wiring. So it's pre-wired for you, and it comes with a set of libraries, and we'll get into more depth about these later. But it comes with a set of functions that are pre-made that do everything interesting you need to do. So you don't have to understand almost anything about what the Ethernet controller chip does and how it works. You can just call these library functions and they will send messages and do all the basic things, and it makes it very simple for you, even if you don't know anything about hardware. So this is another important part of the environment. It's part of why Arduino is so popular. So Arduino environment, if you look at it, you've got the development board, you got the IDE for writing code, and you've got these shields, a variety of shields from different third-party vendors that you can buy that come with libraries that make interacting with different pieces of hardware very easy. So let's look a little bit more at the development board. It's got a microcontroller. It's got a USB interface to a PC. Large open source community. So the board itself, it's an open source design. What that means is that if you go to arduino.cc, go to their website, you'll find the schematics for that board. You'll find, in fact, I think we showed it in earlier slides. We'll find the schematics for that board, the different components on that board, and how they are wired together. So if you wanted to, if you were of a mind to do it, you could take that and design your own board, because it's open source. It's an open design. Don't do that. It's expensive. It's much cheaper to just buy the pre-made board. But you could go ahead and take that board, design it, and build your own. If you wanted to do it cheaply or something like that, you could modify it if you wanted to. So it's an open source design. And there's a large open source community in there that use it. The hardware is open source. Also the software, that IDE that we saw, that's also open source. It's written in Java and it's open source. So you can take that and modify it if you want to. So let's start right here looking at the board, the different components on the board. We've got a reset button. That just resets the device. USB connection. Power connection. So the power is an external power. We won't be needing it, I don't think, because USB can also provide power. So unless you're connecting the Arduino to something more heavy duty, like some motors or something like that, the USB power should be sufficient. So we'll end up using USB power. But there's also a power connector, and it has a coaxial jack. You can plug a wall wart, a wall power into it if you need to. Thank you.